What is up, Flatiron students? Man, I gotta tell you, this is always one of my favorite weeks every year, just to hang out with y'all and kick it. And I was just standing in the back watching y'all worship. And again, man, nothing fills my heart up with more joy than seeing a generation bringing a shout of praise to Jesus. Now, some of you guys I don't know, my name is Karl. I'm one of the pastors here. And before I jump into the talk, before we get into our time together, I kind of want to re-engage your minds, kind of get your minds thinking and working in a way they probably haven't all week. I'm going to do this little kind of riddle kind of thing. If you know the answer to it, don't be that guy or gal and shout out the answer. Just play along, all right? I'm going to ask a series of questions. And as I'm asking these questions, I want you to answer the question in your head. Freshman boys, look at me in the eye. In your head, all right? We got it. All right, here's what I want you to do. Ready? I want you to pick a number between 2 and 10. In your head, pick a number between 2 and 10. Okay, got it? Now we're gonna do math. I know school's not for a couple weeks, but we're gonna do math. Now multiply that number by 9. You picked a number between 2 and 10. Now multiply that number by 9. All right, we're gonna take this one level deeper. You should have a 2-digit number or 3-digit number in your head, right? I want you to take that number and add it together until you have a single-digit number, all right? So if you got 18, let's say 18 is your number, right? 18, so 1 plus 8 equals 9. So just take your number and add it up, the individual numbers, so you have a single-digit number. Everybody got a single-digit number? All right, good. Now here's what I want you to do. Basic math. Take that number and subtract 5. Take that number and subtract 5. We've got arithmetic. Now we're gonna get into grammar. All right, you got a number in your head. Stay with me. You got a number in your head. Now listen, if a number is gonna represent a letter. So if you had A, that would be, if you had 1, that would be A. If you have 2, that would be B. If you have 3, that'd be C. If you had 4, that'd be D. If you had 5, that'd be F. A, B, C, D, E, F, yeah, right? So on and so forth. So whatever number you got in your head, assign the appropriate letter to that number, okay? You have a number, now assign a letter. If it's A, if it's 1, it's A. B, 2, you see where I'm going, okay? Now you got a letter. Really quickly, in lieu of the Olympics, I want you to think of a country that begins with that letter. You got a letter? Now, I want you to think of a country that begins with that letter. All right. Just, this is in your heads. We're almost there. All right, now ready? You got your country. Don't say it. You got your country, don't say it. Spelling. The second letter of that country's name. Take that second letter of that country's name. Okay, you got it. Just keep it in your head. Stay with me. This guy is thinking so hard right here, all right? Take that second letter of that country. What's the first animal you can think of that begins with that letter? Go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, how many people had an elephant from Denmark? Yeah. Sorcery. I am Harry Potter. Yeah, stick that in your pipe and smoke it. All right, I've been doing that trick to students for 20 years, right? But here's the point. Here's the point of that little exercise. Oftentimes, things don't feel like they're connected when we're in the process of discovering it. Oftentimes, things don't feel like they make sense when we're in the process. The payoff was great, right? You're like, oh my God, I got an elephant from Denmark. But in the beginning, you're like, I don't know how to add, and you count on your fingers and all that stuff, right? Life is sometimes like that. I've been alive long enough to know that. Life is sometimes like that, where it's difficult to understand, why am I going through these steps? Why am I going through these events? And how is it going to tell me anything about myself or my purpose? Why did I make these mistakes? How is it all going to play out and come together? People have been asking themselves that question literally for thousands of years. The 12 guys that hung around with Jesus the last 3.5 years of his life, oftentimes it didn't make sense what they were doing, why they were doing it, and when they were doing it. And they found themselves tired, confused, stuck, seemingly feeling like life had no purpose. And then by a fire, a simple meal with Jesus puts everything into focus. This was particularly true for Peter. Peter's like the henchman, the leader of the disciples. He's kind of this guy who just kind of reacts to things and just does things, just shouts things. And before we get into chapter 21, you got to understand the context of what led up to that moment. You see, in John chapter 18, even before John chapter 18, Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane. He's about to be killed. He's about to be arrested to go to the cross to be killed. And Peter's in the Garden of Gethsemane with Jesus. The soldiers come up to arrest Jesus. And Peter is so zealous for God. He is so over the top for Jesus. Peter literally grabs a guy's sword out of his sheath and cuts the guy's ear off. This is coming right after Peter was in the upper room with Jesus, and Peter told Jesus, he's like, listen, all these other bozos, they're gonna leave you, Jesus, but me, I'm never leaving you. I'll do anything for you, Jesus. And in the garden, it seems like Peter's beginning to prove that. But then something happens in John 18. In John 18, Jesus has now been arrested. And Jesus is going to trial. He went through multiple trials that evening. And this particular one happens in the home of the high priest. So John, the guy who wrote the book of John, him and Peter are together following the soldiers to the high priest's house. And as they're making their way, look at what it says in John 18, verse 15. Simon Peter and another disciple, that's John, were following Jesus because this disciple was known to the high priest. He went with Jesus into the high priest's courtyard, but Peter waited outside at the door. The other disciple, who was known by the high priest, came, spoke to the servant girl on duty there, and brought Peter in. John goes in first because the high priest knows him, and then he looks over his shoulder and Peter's not there, so he goes out into the courtyard. He goes outside the house to grab Peter to bring him in. And as Peter's walking in, this young girl says, "You aren't one of this man's disciples too, are you?" You're with Jesus, aren't you? And Peter emphatically replies, "I'm not." Peter could have said anything to this little girl. He could have just kept walking by. But in this moment, Peter draws a line in the sand. He's like, "I'm not with him." And he makes his way in. It was cold. And the servants and officials stood around a fire. You got to remember this part right here. Stood around the fire they had made to keep warm. Peter also standing with them, warming himself. These are the people who are about to cheer for Jesus to be crucified. And Peter's standing next to a fire, warming himself with them. Jesus isn't in some other building. He's not in some other town. He's literally in eye shot of Peter. Jump down to 25. Meanwhile, Simon Peter was still standing there warming himself. So they asked him, "You aren't the one of his disciples too, are you?" You're one of his disciples, aren't you? He denied it, saying, "I'm not. I'm not." Then one of the high priest's servants, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, challenged him. Now somebody's cousin who saw or heard, I just went through puberty, who saw or heard Peter cut his cousin's ear off. He's like, no. Didn't I see you with him in the garden? Again, Peter denied it. At this moment, a rooster crowed. The translation in here, that word again at the beginning of verse 27, it actually is like this exclamatory where Peter's literally cursing at them. He's cursing that he doesn't know Jesus. And a rooster crows. See, that's important because when they were in the upper room, Jesus told Peter, he said, "Before the rooster crows, you're going to deny me 3 times. "No, I won't, Jesus. I'll never turn my back on you." And now here's Peter standing next to that fire in eye shot of Jesus. A failure. He's been following Jesus for 3.5 years. And in an instant, he's failed. I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but I'll go to certain places and I'll remember the smell of that place. And then weeks, months, sometimes years later, I'll smell that smell, and it'll bring me right back to that place. My family, we love Disney, and every time we go to Disney World or Disneyland, we steal all the lotion from the hotel, and we have literally bags of this lotion in our house. And anytime I smell that lotion, it instantly brings me back to the Magic Kingdom. Can you imagine being Peter? Every time a fire is lit for the rest of his life, he remembers his shame. Every time an amber flickers in the air, he remembers his doubt. Every time somebody even talks about putting a fire together, Peter thinks about his denial of his Savior. A failure. So you fast forward. Jesus goes through a couple more trials. Jesus is in prison. The next day, they take Jesus. They whip him, they scourge him, they hit him with the cat of nine tails. They make him carry this cross outside of the city of Jerusalem, up this mountain to Golgotha, the skull mountain. And on that mountain, they crucify and kill Jesus. And 3 days later, God raises him from the dead. But Peter's still a failure. And I don't know about you, but like when I mess up in life, when I screw up, my first thought, how do I get as far away from that failure as possible? So what does Peter do? He goes back to living his life. Goes back to living the way he was living 3.5 years ago before Jesus had ever called him, before his brother Andrew ever told him, hey, I have seen the Messiah. I know the guy we're looking for. Here he is. And Jesus said to him, come and follow me. Peter goes all the way back, this regression in his behavior, his thought, his actions, and even his vocation. See, living in an agrarian society, one of the things these guys used to do is they would fish. You would catch the fish, and then you would sell the fish at market. So Peter goes back to doing one of the things he knows how to do. He goes back to fishing. That's where we catch him in chapter 21. It reads like this. Afterwards, Jesus again appeared to his disciples by the Sea of Galilee. It happened this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, also known as Didymus, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, and the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples were together. I'm going out to fish, Simon Peter told them. And they said, we'll go with you. So they went out and got into the boat. But that night they caught nothing. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize it was him. Full stop. Y'all, sometimes Jesus is so close to us. Sometimes he's so close to us that we either ignore him and deny him, like Peter did by that fire, or we won't allow ourselves to recognize him right in front of us. I'm not under the impression that all of y'all here are followers of Jesus Christ. I hope all of y'all aren't followers of Jesus Christ. That means you're questioning. That means you're discovering. That means you're looking. And sometime so far this week, you had a moment when all these crazy students were down front raising their hands and crying and all that stuff, and you're kind of standing in the back like, what's going on around here? That's okay. It's okay to discover. It's okay to question. But Jesus hasn't moved. The thing that you thought was odd, the thing that you thought was weird, the thing that hasn't yet made sense to you, that's the Spirit of God dwelling in the hearts of those who call him our Savior. Let's keep reading. He called out to them, friends, haven't you any fish? No, they answered. He said, throw your net on the right side of the boat and you will find some. These guys have been fishing since they're little boys. They've been fishing on this lake Their entire lives. They know where all the honey holes are. They know all the spots. And they've been out there all night not catching nothing. And now this guy on the shore is saying, hey, one more try. Throw it on the right side. When they did, they were unable to haul the net in because of the large amount of fish. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." As soon as Simon Peter heard him say, "It is the Lord," he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off, and jumped into the water. The other disciples followed in the boat, towing a full net of fish, for they were not far from shore but 100 yards. Then they landed. They saw a fire of burning coals with fish on it. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast with me." Now none of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. Jesus came, took the bread, gave it to them, and some fish. And this was the third time that Jesus was revealed to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. In the next few minutes, I'm gonna ask y'all to stay in your seat because I want you to consider three questions. I want you to wrestle with three questions that I think if you're honest and really ask yourself, you will be able to discover your purpose. First question is this: who are your people? Who are your people? You see, the disciples forgot about a lot of stuff that Jesus taught them. They forgot about the miracles. They forgot about him walking on water. They forgot about him healing the blind. They forgot about him making the sick. They forgot about him raising Lazarus from the dead. But the one thing the disciples hadn't forgotten was the power of with. Even now in their failure, they stayed together. Peter says, "I'm gonna go fishing." The other guys are like, "Yeah, we'll go with you." Side note, I don't know where we get this idea that if you're a follower of Jesus Christ, you have to have all the answers. These guys had literally seen Jesus do everything, the impossible. They didn't read it in a book. They witnessed it with their own eyes, yet they still doubted. That should give you some relief. You don't have to have it all figured out to walk in your purpose. You don't have to have your whole life together. You don't have to have your future lined up. You don't have to have the school and this and that. I'm gonna live here and I'm gonna have this. You don't have to have all that figured out to follow Jesus, because the guys who were with him couldn't do it. But they knew they had to stay together. Who are your people? Because the people you surround yourself with, those are the people that will help you discover your purpose. But can I tell you something? People are a problem. People are a pain in the rear. People are annoying. People make me uncomfortable. People make life inconvenient. And if I had my way, all my friends would be the exact same. They'd be the way that I am. And I look at your generation, and I see the loneliest generation that's ever walked the face of this earth. You have 1,000 followers on TikTok, but you feel alone. You got a bunch of folks subscribe to your Twitch, but you feel like nobody sees you. Who are your people? In search for your purpose, you are going to need your people. See, Christianity was never meant to be a solo mission. When you want to discover your purpose, you really have got to know, this is my crew. Watching this week, 500 of you or so, and I see students walking alone. Some of you haven't said anything in group all week because you think you're too dumb, you think you're too sinful, you think you're too shameful to be real. And you're bottling up so much yuck and junk in your head, in your heart, and the enemy, the Satan, is telling you, hey, no one's ever gonna see you, no one's ever gonna love you. I've seen it around camp. I don't want to get in anybody's business, but that's kind of my job. I see some of you young ladies hugged up on these dudes. My daughter is across in the middle school camp. So I'm talking to y'all as a dad for a second. Every young lady in the room, give me your eyes. And this isn't just about this week. This is until God presents the man he wants you to marry. That dude ain't your people. That guy's not your people. I'm not telling you not to date. I'm not telling you you can't have crushes. I'm not saying any of that. But if your first reaction is to go to her or him with your doubt, with your confusion, with your seeking purpose, you're going to come up empty-handed. And young men, if you're using the masculinity, the leadership that God's put inside of you, the authority that God's put inside of you for your wife, not my daughter, and you're using that to manipulate a young woman, you are dead wrong. You aren't her people. Stop pretending like you are. Every single one of you, every young lady in this room, every young man in this room, you need an older guy that's speaking into your life. You need a group of men that are your age that you can confess your sins to, you can confess your brokenness to, you can confess your fears to. Ladies, you need some women of God that have gone ahead. And you're like, hey, you're the kind of person I want to follow. Do you know who your people are? Jesus gets back into the boat, the disciples are now back in the boat, and Jesus yells from the shore, he's like, hey, throw your net on the right side. Throw it on the right side. I know you guys have tried other ways, but once in your life, maybe the last time, Jesus is saying to you tonight, try it my way. Try it my way. And it begs this question: what is worth the risk? What is worth the risk of trying things God's way? I know what it's like when I try it my way. I pull the net up, and it's empty. How many of y'all have been pulling the proverbial net up, trying to find purpose, trying to find an answer, asking God, why am I on this planet? Why am I in this family? Why do I live in this neighborhood? Why do I go to this school? Why do I have these struggles? And you're pulling the net, and nothing keeps coming up. What's worth the risk of trying it Jesus' way? I love this quote by Winston Churchill. He says this: success is not final, failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. So many of us often think our failures are final. We think our mistakes are fatal. And Jesus is just like, yo, it's those who have the courage to continue, those who have the courage to risk, who win. Now, we see illustrations like this all throughout Scripture, but I love when I see this in the life of people I know. People who counted a risk and said, Jesus is worth it. And instead of me telling you a story about a guy who did this, I want him to tell you himself. Chris Langston, our student pastor from the Longmont campus, I got to witness this in Chris's life. And I wanted him to talk about what risk for Jesus looks like.
Hi, y'all. Hey, I love what it says in John chapter 21, verse 6, where Peter and the disciples, they're out fishing, they're trying it their way, and it's not working. They're fishing all night, they don't catch anything, and then they try it a different way, Jesus' way, and they're rewarded heavily. And for me, that's part of my story. That's my story too. So I just want to share with you a time that I kind of took a risk, took a leap of faith, and it rewarded me abundantly. So I've been attending Flatirons Church since 2008, and it's been our church home. In fact, my wife and I moved 2,000 miles across the country just to attend Flatirons Church. So that was a risk in itself. We left our family, our friends, everything we knew to try this new church, new to us, and be a part of something bigger than ourselves. And so that was a risk and a leap of faith in itself, but for many years, we were largely just consumers at the church. We showed up every Sunday, we listened to the message, and we left. We weren't getting plugged in, we weren't looking for community, we weren't looking for ways to serve. We were just largely consumers of the church. And it wasn't until 2022 that I finally made the decision that, hey, I want more. I want to be a part of the church, not just attend the church. So I looked for a way to serve, and the way that presented itself was being part of the security team. I applied, I interviewed. For whatever reason, they let me join the team. I'm not sure what that reason was. But little did I know that I was going to find my community, I was going to find purpose, and what I would find out eventually is that most importantly, I was going to find out about student summer camp. So in 2022, that summer, I led a team of 4 security volunteers to our middle school camp in Glorieta, New Mexico. Who was there? Anybody? Right on. Little did I know how big of an impact this week was going to have on me. I navigated a lot of heavy and tough stuff with students. I'm talking anger, unbelief, depression, anxiety, broken homes, abuse, neglect. Some of the stuff that some of you guys are facing right now. So Sean Lord and the team of student pastors were instrumental in helping me navigate that. And it was actually at that camp that Sean first approached me and asked me a simple question. He said, have you ever considered working in student ministry? I think I audibly laughed when he asked me, right? I didn't feel qualified. I wasn't that guy. I didn't know my Bible well enough. I had insecurities. I never felt like I could lead a group of students. So I looked at him, and I could tell he was serious. The look on his face, he really meant it. And I said, wait, are you serious? I mean, here's the thing. To put it in perspective, I had been in the medical field for 20 years. I had a lucrative career. On top of that, my family was about to move to Tennessee in 2 months. And then God opened this door. So he asked me to pray on it. and I prayed on it. And I couldn't help but think that God was opening a door for me, and who was I to say no to God? So, about 2 months later, I joined the team and became the student ministry director at the Longmont campus. This month, I'm celebrating 2 years. So I left a lucrative career. I left the opportunity to move Tennessee to be closer to home, all because God opened a door for me. He asked me to take a risk, take a leap of faith. And I'm so thankful for the opportunities that Flatirons has provided for me, but more importantly, the opportunities that God has given me to take those leaps of faith, because the reward was immense.
You might be sitting there and you're thinking, well, what about me? See, your risks may seem too small for others to notice, but that simple act of trust is enough to grab God's attention and begin to point you towards your purpose. It wasn't just that conversation with Sean. It was Chris listening to that quiet, still voice of Jesus that was like, hey, move thousands of miles to be near this church. What's that morsel of trust for you? What's worth risking? Is it a sports team that you've been a part of since you've been 6? Is it a job that you think you need to have in the fall? Is it a relationship, a school, an idea of a profession? What could God do with that risk? Chris is a living, breathing example of what it looks like when somebody casts their net on the right side. Third question I want you to wrestle with is this: what do you need to leave behind? What do you need to leave behind? When Peter hears John says, it is the Lord, he hears it and he instantly just grabs his coat, wraps it around him, and jumps into the lake and starts swimming towards Jesus. This is a literal picture of Peter leaving his life behind for Jesus. He leaves the old life behind and is like, that's where I'm going. That's where I'm gonna find the answers. That's where I'm gonna find the answers. But he had to stop something. He had to quit something in order to step into his purpose with Jesus. I love the way that Bob Goff says this. Bob Goff says, we can't change much if we don't quit much. If you're looking for change in your life, look at me in the eyes, I want you to get this. There's some stuff you gotta give up. There's some stuff you gotta leave in the past. There's some addictions, some insecurities, some sin behaviors, some self-worth behaviors, some confidence or lack thereof. You gotta leave it in the boat and with all your might, swim towards Jesus. Peter does, and everything changes. But a couple years ago, I remember meeting this young guy. And as he sat across the table from me, I said, all the things you left behind to do this. He's not a guy, his name's not in the Bible, but it's on our website somewhere. John Miller, our Aurora student pastor, I remember hearing John's story and saying to myself, what kind of courage does it take to do what you did? What would you share with him, John?
What's up, guys? I'm a Denver kid. I grew up in Arvada. I went to Ralston Valley High School. Shout out, yeah. And honestly, like, from the outside looking in, like, I had a pretty normal family. Even, like, that's what my friends thought. But what they didn't see behind closed doors was I had parents who constantly were telling me how worthless I was, how disappointed they were, how much they didn't want me, how I wasn't ever going to be good enough. And that kind of led me to kind of make decisions where I thought that I knew what was best for my life, where I thought, okay, if they don't want me at all, then I'm just going to start living my life my way. And that honestly got me into a couple different crowds. There were a lot of drugs and partying and money and bad things that I was getting involved in because I was just living a life for myself. And like, I started doing so many things that were so hard, or not even hard, but horrific, honestly, that it still pains me today that I hurt so many people because of the decisions I made. And I can't really talk about all the things that I was doing in the time that I have, but to explain it best, like, in January, when we launched camp, I'm sure most of you guys in this room were bombarded by your leaders. Sign up for camp, sign up for camp. We need you there, get there. Probably annoying, right? When I was in high school, when the youth group I was attending, because my friends made me go, when they launched camp, I got told that I wasn't allowed to go because I was too far gone. And so then it was like, okay, God doesn't want me either. And honestly, like, so much happened in between then and when I was 19, I kind of decided that I should follow Jesus for the first time and let all this stuff go. And I'll be honest, don't clap, don't clap, don't clap. I'm not done. I'll be honest. Sorry, guys. I'll be honest. When Karl asked me to speak today, that was going to be the end of my story. And when I started thinking about it, I'll be honest, the addictions that I needed to break that I thought I broke were honestly pretty easy. It was easy to give it up because I just didn't want to do it anymore. I used it too much, and it wasn't the high I was looking for anymore. And so when I became a believer, the high that I was searching for was working so hard that I felt like I deserved to be a part of it, that I deserved to be a part of the church, that I deserved to be this pastor guy. And to be honest, when I was 19, and honestly all the way till this last Easter, I chased that. I chased myself earning the right to stand on this stage. And and what I had to realize was that there was nothing I could have done to earn it. What I needed to leave in that boat was myself. Was that there was something unique or special or something that I did that made me qualified to do it. And to be honest, it really was rooted in I didn't know my value. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I was worth because I was told I was worthless my entire life. So I thought I had to earn it every step of the way. And on Easter, Jim made this line that is still true today. Just, I'm here because the man on the middle cross said I could. And it took me, because I'll be honest, guys, like, I still don't know why God wants to use me, but I left it in the boat because right now I can honestly say that I am sitting here in front of you guys free. I'm sitting here with this confidence that I believe in who he says he is. It doesn't make any sense. I don't know why he does. I don't know why he values me the way he does, because I'm going to be honest, there's a lot of people that'll tell you how worthless I am and that I'm scum because I've hurt them so many times. I had to believe that value wasn't what other people were saying about me, but value was what he was saying about me. And to end it with you guys, like your guys' value, like value is, the definition of value is what is someone or something, like what are they willing to pay for that? And it was honestly believing that I was somehow worth it, that this guy, this Jesus character, said that I was so valuable that he would get on that cross for me, that he would say, hey, cast your net on this side, just trust. So what I left in the boat was myself, was drugs, was all of that stuff. And I'll be honest, guys, it was the best decision I've ever made. Since Easter, guys, like, dude, life is so good. And I've never experienced that before. So, yeah.
Maybe like when John was 19, it was a habit. Maybe it's a habit you got. Maybe it's a shame that you've been carrying. A failure. A doubt. Whatever it is, to go forward, you need to leave it behind. And trust that Jesus still wants you. The first thing he says to Peter, come, have breakfast with me. He doesn't shame him. He doesn't yell at him. He doesn't tell him how disappointed he is. He says, come share this meal around this fire. And I bet when Peter sat up to that table like Jesse talked about this morning, the smell of the fire brought him back. The smell of his failure pierced his nostrils. But in an instant, Jesus turns it into a fragrance of Peter's future. Jesus wants to use the broken parts of you to point you towards your purpose. Jesus wants to say, look at what you left behind and look at what I can do. This author said this in this book that I read a bunch of years ago. He said, we think we wander into desolate places by accident when God has actively conspired to get you there, to have you all to himself. God has been actively conspiring to get you right here, to get you into that group that you're in, so that you could discover your people, so that you could hear that it's worth risking some things, maybe even some good things for Jesus, so that you could hear that there are things that need to be left behind for you to fully embrace the purpose that God has set out for you. So then Jesus asks Peter, Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? He's pointing to the other disciples like, Peter, do you love me more than these guys? More than the fishing? More than the future of working for your dad? Do you trust me? Do you love me more than these? And Peter said, Lord, he said, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. See, the word Peter, there's two definitions for love there. Jesus is talking about agape love. It's a selfless love, an unconditional love. And Peter responds to him. He's like, no, I love you. It's phileo love, which is like brotherly love, which he's like, no, I'm your friend, Jesus. And Jesus is like, no, I don't think you get it, Peter. Simon, son of John, do you love me? Yes, Lord, you know I love you. Jesus says, take care of my sheep. The third time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Now Peter was hurt because Jesus had asked him a third time, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my sheep. If you love me, Peter, feed my sheep. If you love me, go back to your school and tell somebody about me. If you love me, stop walking around hopeless and find some people that love the same God that you do and ask them to love you. If you love me, maybe make the decision now when you're 16 or 17 and don't wait till you're 40 like Chris. And say, no, today I'm deciding that after high school, I'm gonna go to Flatirons College. I'm gonna get a degree in ministry. And I wanna be the guy, I wanna be the girl in 10 years that's leading students to a camp like this. If you love me, be a kingdom worker. And in an instant, Jesus restores Peter. But he doesn't just restore Peter, he commissions Peter. Here's what I want you to get. This is what this whole thing is about. It's what this whole week's about. That you get away from the confusion, the noise, maybe even the confusion and noise that's in your head. And you would hear from Jesus. And you would hear the truth of Jesus' words. Y'all, Jesus isn't just looking for blind obedience. Jesus isn't looking for you to take a vow. Jesus is simply saying, love me. Unconditionally. And watch what I'll do in you. Purpose isn't found and plucked out of the air. It's formed. One step at a time. And when we find our people, when we take risk for Jesus, when we leave the yuck and the junk and the doubt and the sin behind us, we're 3 steps closer to our purpose. Now, it's all good that I said all this and you heard from Chris and John, but you've got to make the decision. What is it? Do you need people? Are you lonely and alone and anxious in your thoughts? Do you need real people? Not a text group, not simply just that, but you need someone face to face to see you. Tonight, ask for that. Or maybe you know there's something you need to risk. Because Jesus is worth it. Maybe it's an idea of what you thought you were going to be. And the Spirit of God is stirring in your heart today, and he's like, no. You thought you were going to do that? This is what you're actually going to do. Tell somebody. What is it you need to leave behind? What addiction? What doubt? What shame? Are you carrying all by yourself that you need to leave in the boat? Tonight, tell somebody. And then pray to God that he would point you towards your purpose. We're not going to talk about it. We're going to be about it. And I want you to stay right in this same posture. But I want you to get up in a second. I want you to find your small group. If they're too far, just find a group of other students. I want you to circle up. And I'd love for a leader to be in each group. And very quickly, what you're going to go around the circle and say with me, say with me. You're just going to say which one of those three things you need tonight. Surround in the circle, say, hey, I need some people in my life. I need to risk this relationship or this future that I thought I was supposed to have. Or I need to lay down, leave behind this insecurity, this sin, this doubt, this shame. And after you go around the circle, I'd love for an adult just to pray over that group, that those students who just confessed would find their purpose, would be formed in their purpose. And then when you guys get this small group tonight, for some of y'all, it's going to be the first night you get real with the people that God has placed in your life. I want you to dive deeper into those questions and confidently ask Jesus to purpose you. So go ahead, raise up right now, stand up right now, find your group. Don't make a lot of noise, just get there quickly, get there quietly, circle up. And it might be one word, it might be a quick sentence. But don't miss this moment. Don't miss this moment. If you see somebody standing by themselves, go over there. Put your arm around them. That's your people. Go around your circle. Who needs people? Who needs to risk something? Who needs to leave something behind?